In the book, you make the argument that the American Revolution might have been the first global war. In what way was it a global war? Because I think that's a new way of framing it.
It's certainly a new way for many Americans to hear this founding fight described as well. I do think it's a global war, and I think we've chosen to forget the global reach and resonance of that war in a process of narrowing and nationalizing, mythologizing and romanticizing that's been happening for 250 years. So we end up, at least in the United States, with a narrow story of rebels versus redcoats that has no room for anyone else. Whereas the actual war, I think, was a sprawling, sweeping conflict that took in folks as far away as Prussia, West Africa, India, and eventually Australia.
I guess people's classic images of the American Revolution is obviously Washington crossing the Delaware and scrappy militias and Minutemen and patriots, but obviously there was European allies involved. So could you talk a little bit about the role of Spain and France and their efforts and how they helped the Americans? Because I think people underappreciate that.
The French army, the French navy were major factors, not only at Yorktown, one of the climactic sieges towards the end of the war, but in many naval encounters with the British Royal Navy, which makes sense, of course, because the Patriots, the Continental Army, they don't really have a navy. So if they want to contest the supremacy of the Royal Navy on the high seas, they're going to need help, Donald, of course, right? So they turn to the French government and the French Navy, and they turn to the Spanish government and the Spanish Navy. And when you put the second largest navy in the Atlantic, which is France, alongside the third largest navy in the Atlantic, which is Spain, and combine their forces, you suddenly have a new naval force vastly superior to the number one navy in the Atlantic, which is the British Royal Navy. So this is Patriot strategy, to bring in major European powers, especially for their navies, especially for their deep pockets and lines of credit. And with Spain, they go all in. They're on the sidelines until 1779, but once they get in, my God, they are in it to win it. You don't see Spanish troops on the ground in any of the 13 rebel colonies in America, so they can be easy to miss, but they're everywhere else. They swarm into British Florida, which had formerly been Spanish Florida, in hopes of taking it back, and are remarkably successful. They swarm into the Great Lakes region, attacking British forts in what would now be the Chicago area, something we don't normally think about in the Revolutionary War. They're fighting British forces on the Isthmus of Panama as British forces try to defend a couple of logging colonies there and Spanish forces try to drive them out. And then most notably, Donald, the Spanish are engaged in invading southern England in 1779 and in invading British Gibraltar, which used to be Spanish Gibraltar, of course, on Spain's southern tip. So Spain is everywhere all at once and give the British War Command every possible headache.